All right, so we are back, people of YouTube. Good morning, and welcome to the first ever episode of Banlist Predictions. So here we are in the BT6/EX format in North America, where I sit, and Japan is on their EX2/BT8 format. And they're getting ready to come out with a ban list. So obviously their ban list will include more cards, such as hits impacting possibly BT8 and EX2 sets. But we know for sure that those sets will include, or that list will include limits for BT7 as well. And so some of the notable offenders I have them on the screen right now, most notably Tommy and Cory Kakumon. People are talking about the Eismon engine being kind of overpowered. Haven't really played against it, so I don't... Like, on paper, yeah, they seem really good, but it seems like it's going to be really busted whenever the new Chimeramon comes out. Which I don't know if... I think we're getting in the set after that. But, yeah, Jet Sylphimon is also really busted, but... These cards are going to impact the ban list in a way that I don't know for sure because I haven't playtested with these cards as much. But these will impact our list, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to predict the other cards that are going to be impacted by the ban list, and kind of give my thoughts on where I think the game stands and what the best course of action to take in a game like this would be with a ban list. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. These are the cards that I expect to go to 0. I have Mega Digimon Fusion and Hidden Potential Discovered. So with Hidden Potential Discovered, I think it shouldn't stay at 1. I think it can go to either 0, or I think it can go to 4. I don't think there's any other way to do it. The problem with green is that all of your Digimon cost like 5 to evolve into, at least all of the good ones. For level 6s. Most notably, the big example being Nidhogg right here. Nidhogg is a just great green card. It's probably the best one we got. And if you have HPD at 4, then cards like Nidhogg become kind of an issue. Cards like the new Mega Gargomon from the EX collection become kind of an issue. So you could do a thing where you put HPD to 4 and then limit some of the big green megas. You could do that, or you could just remove HPD from the picture. The problem is Bandai is still designing green cards around HPD because they know they've printed this card already. That's why cards like Mega Gargomon cost 5 to evolve into, even though it's a fairly new card that they've printed, and yeah, cards shouldn't really cost 5 anymore. So... that's my thoughts on HPD. Like, I don't think it should stay at 1, because it just feels kind of sacky whenever it does happen. I understand that green isn't really doing anything right now, but in BT7, green gets really good, and that's kind of through the lens we have to look at whenever we're looking at the ban list predictions for our upcoming format, because BT7 is our upcoming format. But Mega Digimon Fusion is probably the biggest offender. This, I can say for certain, needs to go to 0. HPD, you can make the argument it could stay at 1. You can make the argument it could go to 0. You can make the argument it could go to 4. I understand all of those arguments. Mega Digimon Fusion cannot stay in the game. It needs to go to 0. And the reason for that is we are getting Susanomon introduced in BT7. Now, you can't limit Susanomon, because then you hurt sales for BT7, because this is one of the big chase cards that we have. But what this does is it allows you to evolve on top of one of your tamers as if the tamer itself is a level 6. And Mega Digimon Fusion can make that absolutely free. So then you get to delete anything you want and then swing for 3 security for free. And that's really, really busted. I come from Yu-Gi-Oh!, Force of Will, Pokemon, and generally the facilitators for just terrible gameplay situations are cards that let you cheat out a big boss monster for free or for way less than you should normally be able to. And that's kind of the theme with the cards that I'm putting to 0 on my preferred list would be these two. Definitely Mega Digimon Fusion and possibly HPD. But yeah, absolutely. And I think these are the only two cards that really need to be banned. You can make the argument that Ice Wall needs to be banned, but my argument for Ice Wall is that it needs to be put to 1. Ice Wall isn't really an issue if you just get hit by it once and then you then you never have to worry about it again. The problem with Ice Wall is whenever your opponent drops 2 of them at once on you, or possibly they drop 1, set you to 1 memory, and then on the next turn they drop another 1, and then it just snowballs from there. So we are in a format where games are very, very aggressive and are decided in a small amount of turns, and if you can fog your opponent for a whole turn, where basically you make it so that they can only attack with 1 dude, you're going to win that game, especially in matchups like Jessamon, Gabu Bond, and just any of the hyper-offensive decks that exist. So Ice Wall, for sure, needs to be put to 1, minimum. I can see the argument for it going to 0. I absolutely can. But I think the problem is with multiple Ice Wall. So I think if you put it to 1, you solve that problem. So that's my prediction. I predict Ice Wall to go to 1. Plus, I'm also predicting that Bandai isn't going to do a semi-limited list. I think Bandai is just going to ban cards and just going to have cards that they put to 1. I think having a semi-limited list is going to be a lot to manage, and if they don't have to do that, then they aren't going to. I think with a semi-limited list, you can get more nuance. You can start making more arguments for more cards. Whereas with a 0 and 1, you have to have a really good argument for putting a card to 0 to 1. And I have really good arguments for all of these cards. One of the cards that you'll notice is on the slide is Argomon level 5, which is currently at 1. I do not see an argument for this card to stay at 1. I just don't. Maybe somebody has one. You can drop it down in the comments, but I haven't heard an argument for Argomon staying at 1 that I've thought was a coherent argument. So that being said, I have it at 4. I have the Argomon level 5 going to 4 on this ban list because it does not need to stay at 1 anymore. The other 2 cards that I have as going to 1 in, this card's place are going to be Reinforcing Memory Boost and Starter Deck Greymon. So I see a lot of people saying that Jessamon needs to be hit in some way. I don't know if I agree with that opinion, but I don't agree with limiting Balhuckmon. If you limit Balhuckmon, you severely hurt the consistency of that deck, and the deck's biggest problem is consistency already, so you're basically taking a deck like that and erasing its existence in the format, and that is not fair to Jessamon or fans of Jessamon. However, what you can do is you can limit Starter Deck Greymon. This card takes away Jessamon's ability to just OTK you out of nowhere. They still kind of can if they have, the Omni and, a certain setup. But the Greymon makes it so easy. And a lot of the problems that you see arguments with for red decks start with having this Greymon in your stack. So if you take this Greymon and you limit it to 1, you eliminate that issue. And I think that's the most fair hit, because you aren't writing any red deck out of existence by making this hit, and you aren't impacting any red deck in a way where they cannot function anymore. You're just hurting them in the way that they can't OTK you from just the ideal stack out of nowhere. I see people arguing for limiting Taikamiya. That's one of the only memory setters you have in red, so I don't really agree with limiting that card to 1. If Bandai does a semi-limited list, you can make an argument for that card going to 2, but I don't think any memory setter tamer should go to 1 until we get more options for memory setter tamers. So I think the Greymon is the most logical hit for red instead of the Taikamiya. And reinforcing memory boost, this card is just kind of a problem. It's not like absurdly broken by itself. It's just really good. And it's just, there's no real argument for it to be not limited to 1. Being able to boost it for 3 memory is absurd. That's on most of your average cards are going to cost like 3 memory. Like to either hard play a rookie, to evolve into an ultimate, or to a level 6, you're going to spend 3 memory on making a play for a card. And the reinforcing memory boost lets you play an extra card. In addition, it lets you draw, it lets you recover. This card is just really, really good. And if you want to impact yellow hybrids just prematurely without impacting the sales of your next set, limiting this card makes the most sense. Because this will hurt yellow hybrids, and it won't hurt the sales for BT7. So I think limiting reinforcing memory boost makes the most sense in that regard. And I think that these 3 are the cards that I have the most solid arguments for limiting. And I can't really make an argument for any other card in the format to limit it to 1. I'm on the fence, or I'm on the train that you don't really need to implement too many limits or restrictions in a game if you don't have to. Players can learn to play and adapt around them. We see that happen in the Pokemon VGC a lot, which I used to be a super active member of, but have been less active lately because of global events, but looking to get back into that as well. And there's hardly ever bans or restrictions in VGC. Players learn to adapt, and they adapt the metagame, and even though you don't see limits or restrictions, you see the metagame changing week after week in a game that's been out for a couple years at this point, and that's kind of the mentality I see with Digimon, is that players should adapt. However, these 3 cards that I have here make the game very, very hard to adapt, and most importantly, Mega Digimon Fusion is just very, very hard to play around. So I mentioned a semi-limited list and something that Bandai could do, and I have my biggest offenders here. So if you are going to make a list where you're going to limit cards from 4 to less than 4, I don't think 3 makes sense, because that's not really hurting the consistency as much. Making a list where cards are at 3 won't impact the game at all. But you could have a semi-limited list where you limit cards to 2. Now, these are the cards that I feel like if you limit to 1, you will hurt the identity of some decks, but also, like, these cards are just innately really good, and you can splash them into a lot of decks, and they just add a lot of value into any deck that they're in. So maybe putting these cards to 2 is a decision Bandai could make to help the overall balance of the game. And it won't impact the format in such a way that, like, these cards would be unplayable, or certain decks would be unplayable. It would just limit certain strategies in a way that they can't abuse certain strategies anymore. So one of the cards, or 2 of the cards I have on the list are the TK Takaishi from BT1, as well as the Taikamiya from BT1. So these are generic memory setters for both red and yellow, but they are arguably the most broken memory setters that we have printed in the game, and that's 8 sets in. And they just continue to be that strong. Now, I don't think you can put them to 1 because they are memory setters, and some decks would lose all function if they were limited to only playing 1 memory setter. However, I think if you put them to 2, that would be a-okay. And that would limit the viability of decks like Jessamon and Yellow Hybrid without destroying decks like Shine Greymon or regular Greymon Tribal. You know, So I think these lists, or these cards getting semi-limited would make sense. I think you can't make an argument for putting them to 1. I also have Zwart Defeat on here, because Zwart Defeat is just kind of broken. It's always been broken. It's always going to be broken. And seeing 4 of it in list is kind of just disheartening, because it is kind of a gatekeeper card for newer players. Like, newer players getting into the game see security control and they go, oh, I want to play that. And they go, oh, well, Zwart Defeat is like a $65 card. Maybe I don't want to play that. And, maybe putting Zwart Defeat to 2 wouldn't limit the viability of security control at all, and it would make the deck more accessible to some players. I don't really have a strong argument for semi-limiting Zwart Defeat, other than the fact that I just want this card to be semi-limited. But that's my own opinion, and I don't really have a stronger argument than that. Other than, just the odds of hitting it in security go down, and hitting this card in security can swing a game unfairly just out of nowhere. And that's kind of a RNG factor that some players are a little bit uncomfortable with. But honestly, that's the best argument that can be made, and I don't know if that's enough to get this card semi-limited. Moving on, we have Magnadramon. Magnadramon is a card that facilitates super stall style strategies, and that gets kind of degenerate, especially with yellow hybrids and decks coming out like that. But I don't see the argument to putting it to 1. I've heard players make that argument. I do not agree with that argument. However, I do see their point, and I can understand limiting this card to 2. No, you can't play, or you can't have this card go any less than that, though. Mechanori is a card that I think is pretty stupid design-wise. When I saw this card get revealed initially, I was really excited for it, and I was like, yeah, this is a great card. Most decks can tech this against Rookie Rush, and it's just a good generic blocker. The problem with Mechanori is it's arguably become better than regular blockers. Cards like Grizzlymon, cards like Cordramon, cards like Unimon, you can make the argument to just replace all of them outright with Mechanori, because for four memory costs, if they have a memory tamer, you're set at 1, you just play this, set them to their obligatory 3, or, you both have memory tamers in play, you play a 2-cost card, you play Mechanori, you set them to their obligatory 3, and you can turn off some decks. Decks like Rookie Rush, decks like Bond of Friendship, decks like Commandramon, all of them have to include techs to get around Mechanori, because Mechanori is so impactful in the format. So I can see the argument for it going to 2. That being said, I cannot see the argument for it going to 1 or banning it, because I think it is healthy to have this card in the game. However, I can see the argument for it being unhealthy at more than 2 in any given list. Decks like, Three Musketeers can absolutely abuse this. Decks like Security Control play this. Heck, I've seen Bond of Friendship tech it. I've seen Jessmon tech it, just because it's a great blocker and it can slow the game down long enough for decks to get their combo pieces in order. So it's one of the most splashable cards in the game, and I can definitely see the argument for putting it to 2, just because of how versatile and how splashable it is. And the last card that I'm going to go over is going to be Win Rate 60%. This card is kind of in line with Mega Digimon Fusion and HPD. Like, it lets you warp, so to speak, into a higher level card for a lot cheaper. And this card, I don't think is a problem yet. However, I think it could be a problem later on. So I have this on here as kind of like on the horizon sort of card. Maybe if it's a problem in BT8 or EX2, maybe we limit it then to 2. But I don't know enough about future formats to make that argument yet. But this is a card that I'm reading now, and I see the potential for it to become a problem later on down the road. So maybe it's a card we consider limiting to 2. That being said, it does give a massive buff to purple. It does give a massive buff to green, and other colors that rely on big stacks that are expensive to get into, kind of slower decks, really get a buff from this card. So I don't think it is healthy for this card to be banned, but it is a card that I want to keep my eye on because, it could be broken later on. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I think that's about it. These cards for sure. Mega Digimon Fusion for sure will go to 0. HPD will move somewhere. Don't know exactly where, but it's not going to stay at 1. Ice Wall, Reinforcing Memory Boost, and Greymon all to 1, and Argomon to 4. Those are my for sure definite predictions. If you want to make the argument for cards going to 2, these 6 are the offenders that I see, and then possibly some of these cards from BT7. But yeah, those are my ban list predictions. Hope you all enjoyed this kind of content. It's my first time making content like that, so let me know in the comments what you guys thought, what I could do better, changes you want to see, and that's about it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, everybody. We will see you guys in the next video. Bye.